Okay, a pleasant day to each and every one of you. So now marks the another lecture in General Biology 2, which is entitled The Introduction to Taxonomy and Phylogenetics. So before we proceed with our discussion for today, may I request each and every one of you to get first a pen and pencil and also a yellow pad paper for you to take down notes, all of the necessary things that we will be discussing today or we are going to discuss today. And for those students that have tablets and pads, you may also get that so that the information will be retained to your memory. Okay. Now let us proceed with the objectives of our topic for today. So for the first one, you have to define taxonomy and systematics. Now you have to delineate the difference of taxonomy and systematics. Second, describe the historical development of taxonomy. So we were going to discuss some of the dates when we talk about how does taxonomy develop in the scientific community. Third, you have to explain the importance of using scientific name. And also, at the end of the session, I am expecting each and every one of you to write a scientific name correctly. And lastly, to explain how evolutionary relationships are used as a basis for classifying organisms. So if you find our objective clear, I think we can now further proceed with our discussion for today's video. So before we proceed or delineate the difference of systematics and taxonomy, let us first define the following terms. So when we talk about systematics, it is the study of diversity by determining evolutionary relationships of organisms. On the other hand, when we talk about taxonomy, it is the discipline of identifying, naming, and classifying organisms, whether living or extinct. So to simply put it in terms, when we talk about taxonomy, it's all about naming, no? Whether the said organism is extinct or living up to this date. When we talk about taxonomy, we also have to discuss nomenclature or proper naming of the organism. On the other hand, when we talk about systematics, we are talking about the name of the organism plus the evolutionary relationship of each organism, no? So you also have to talk about the phylogeny or the phylogenetics, no? When you talk about phylogeny, it is the relationship, no, of one organism to the another. You have to talk about the morphology or form, plus the structure of the organism, and also you have to traverse the evolutionary paths that they have forged for them to become a species of their own. So when we talk about classification, no, we have this famous scientist in the name of Aristotle. No? He mentioned, or Aristotle developed the system of dividing organisms as either plant or animals. But in today's society, we know that organism or living things are much more complex than being an animal and plant. But back then, no, Aristotle classified living things into two things, no, namely the plants and animals. Plants can be small, medium, or large, and animals can be living in land, water, and air. So these are the basic classification that Aristotle has proposed to the scientific community for them to have a specific systems on how they can classify things. No? Plants were divided according to their sizes, herbs, shrubs, and tree. And just what you can see in the picture at the upper right part, animals is categorized based on their habitat, no, or where they live and thrive. No, we have the land, water, and air. So those are the basic history of classification according to Aristotle. Now we also have to mention, we discuss about history of classifications. Our classification is Carolus Linnaeus. No? Carolus Linnaeus is a Swedish botanist which develops the binomial nomenclature system. So when we talk about binomial nomenclature system, we have to chunk down the words for you to be able to understand it better. Sinabing bi or prefix bi, it simply means two. Nomial means term, so two term, and nomenclature just simply means naming. So binomial nomenclature system is a two-term naming that the scientists use for them to name a specific organism scientifically. So when we do scientific naming, we often use the term or language of Latin, no? But the first question is, why do we use Latin in naming specific organism or species? Very simple, no? In our language class, we are taught that language is dynamic, no? It is ever changing, meaning in every era, there can be a variety of meaning, or each language can be transformed from one to the another. So technically, when we use Latin term or Latin word, Latin is said to be a dead language, meaning it is not changing. So when we use scientific name, no, we can easily pinpoint what type of animals or organism we are referring to. For example, we have Homo sapiens. No, you can easily distinguish that Homo sapiens are humans in today's time. For example, we have Cucurbita maxima, no, or squash. So technically, when we use scientific name, it is easily translation in Latin term. Cucurbita and maxima just simply means big. So if you're going to look at the structure or morphology of Cucurbita maxima or squash, it is big in nature. No, so we have here the Carolus linnaeus. No, in the Linnaean system, there are only two things, no, or two reasons that Carolus Linnaeus has mentioned. No, it allowed for classification system based on evolutionary relationship, which was developed only in succeeding centuries. It provides a common name for a particular organism when identified by scientists or different nationalities. So before we proceed with the next slide, may I request you, yes, you, student that is listening to me, to get a peso bill. Any peso bill that you can get right now. So I'll be giving you 5 to 10 seconds to get any peso bill. And I want you to observe the scientific name that is being used in our peso bill. No? From 20 pesos to 1,000 pesos, you can easily distinguish that the Philippine banknotes or PNB utilize proper naming of classification, just like what Carolus Linnaeus has mentioned. No? It follows binomial nomenclature wherein the specific genus is capitalized and the specific epithet is in lowercase. So we will explore that later in the next slides to come. So as you can see, ito yung this is the taxon, no, or the different arrangement that Carolus Linnaeus have mentioned, from species, genus, order, class, phylum to kingdom. And as you can see, there is no domain yet that Carolus Linnaeus has proposed. No. So again, when we use scientific names, so I believe you already got your banknote, no, from 20 pesos to 1,000 peso bill. You can easily distinguish the scientific name can be located at the part wherein the organism is located. Tama ba? So there are varieties of ways on how to write scientifically. No? For number one, we can write it on a soft copy or pwedeng hand printed. No? So when we do scientific name in hand printed, the first or the genus is in uppercase and then the specific epithet is in lowercase. But when we write it in handwritten, you have to underline the genus and species. But when you see it in any paper or examination, for example, when we use scientific names or write scientific names, it has to be, it has to follow the correct scientific naming. No, just like what I have mentioned, the genus needs to be capitalized, and the specific epithet or the species needs to be in a lowercase. But the most important thing when we see scientific name in a hard copy paper, it has to be italicized, no? And based on what you have got there as a peso bill, no, I hope you can see or distinguish that scientific name that is written in your paper is said to be in an italicized form, no? So following this one, no, we have the binomial nomenclature. I mean, again, let us talk about it. So bi means two, nomial means term, and nomenclature naming. So binomial nomenclature is a two-term naming that we use in naming scientifically, no? So for example, we have the lion, the specific genus is Panthera, and the specific epithet or species is Leo. So the scientific name of lion is Panthera leo. And these are the following common examples that we can use or see in the screen. No, at the left, right side, we can see the different plants and animals and also their scientific name. So for the pea plant, we have Pisum sativum. For onion plant, we have the Allium cepa. For the mango, we have the Mangifera indica. And for the animals, no, as you can see, from frog to common crop, you can easily distinguish that it follows the proper naming and also writing of scientific name. Again, what are the rules? First one, the genus needs to be italicized. So the first letter of the genus needs to be italicized. The specific species, no, or specific epithet needs to be in a lower case. Sorry, the genus needs to be in uppercase, and both of them needs to be italicized, no? As you can see in the examples that are listed. Originally, a scientific name is devised by considering the organism's morphological characteristic or habitat. So technically, utilizing Latin terms, no, or scientific names, the original Latin term for each and every organism is based on their morphology or characteristic. Just like what I have mentioned earlier, the squash, no, or Cucurbita maxima, no, the term maxima just simply means big, no. We can see the morphology or form of the organism and structure. But as we try to name varieties or diversities of organism, there are scientists that name scientifically based on number one, themselves, no, the scientists that discover the species. And second, they can also name scientifically by coining the term or coining their places. So for example, the Philippines, their city or region. No? In our example in here, we can see that we have an American black bear as a scientific name of Ursus americanus. So you can easily distinguish that Americanus is a continent, no, in an America, no. So Ursus is a Latin word for bear, no, napakasimple. Ursus just simply means bear, and the bear is native in North America, thus having the specific epithet Americanus. The genus is used for general characteristics, while the specific epithet is for labeling a particular species. Another example, no? Today, the genus name of an organism is used to tell the closest relative of species in terms of evolutionary relationship. For example, very close relative of Ursus americanus are the grizzly bear or Ursus arctos, and the polar bear naman, the Ursus martimus. No? We have here the grizzly and also the polar bear. They differ in color. No? So just like what I've mentioned earlier, there are specific rules that we need to follow when we write scientifically. And these are the things that I want you to learn at the end of the session. No? First thing that comes into your mind, no, when we talked about naming or writing scientifically is number one, the first letter of the genus should be written in capital letter, no, or in uppercase. No? For example, we have here the Canis familiaris or the dog. The canis, the letter C in the canis is in uppercase or capital letter. Second, the specific epithet should be written in all small letters. The term familiaris is written in small letter or in lowercase, as you can observe in our example. The scientific name is computerized. It should be written in italics or naka-italicized. It's evident in our example that the scientific name Canis familiaris is in italicized form. The scientific name is handwritten. The genus and the species should be underlined separately. So when you practice, for example, in your home, no, at your house, you can write scientifically by handwritten, and you have to underline the term canis and also the term familiaris. So there should be a space between them. No, hindi siya isang buong canis familiaris ay may underline sa baba. No, there should be a space in between them. If the specific name has already appeared once, it can be written in latter appearance with only the first letter of the genus written. So this can be observed when you have an III or PR to study that has scientific name. If you're going to have an example in here, diba? For example, the term Pseudomonas aeruginosa, no? At first, the whole name of the Pseudomonas aeruginosa needs to be in full, no? But when you see the text of the whole study, no, it is abbreviated as P. aeruginosa, okay? And for example, in here, the Canis familiaris, if it is mentioned for quite some time, it has to be written as C. familiaris, okay? So that is the correct way in writing scientific. Now, let us talk about evolution and classification. So last time, or our previous discussion revolves about evolution. And you have realized that evolution is all about the change of the phenotype or characteristic of the same population. Tama ba? So the theory of evolution can be summarized in 3 words, no? Based on our father, what you call this? No, the descent with modification, or the father of evolution in the name of Charles Darwin. The theory further implies that we all came from the common unicellular ancestor. So we also encounter the term LUCA, or last universal common ancestor. So if you're going to look at the example in here, no, we can easily see that different organism or species traverse different pathways or forge different pathways for them to be able to become a species. No, they come from their predecessor, and again they evolve based on their needs and also based on the environment. Therefore, we have the diverse group of organism or species. Through the course of time, the common ancestor produced offspring with modification. So technically, the descendant that has been produced is subjected to modification. The modifications accumulated and produced the vast diversity of species we observe today. Thus, we have different types of organism from different habitat that we can observe. Now, as you can see in our example, this is the hierarchy of biological classification. So when we talk about classifications, no, we encounter these terms, no, particularly the species, genus, family, order, class, phylum, and kingdom. No, these are the 7 taxonomic category or rank in nested within one another, and each category serves as the filter for narrowing down organism who shares particular traits or more accurately share the same ancestry. So technically, if you can imagine this one, we can also look at it in an inverted pyramid, no, wherein we can look at it the beginning, no, we can see that the kingdom at the top and the species or specific epithet at the bottom. So as you can see in the example, this is from exclusive to inclusive ang ating approach. Tama ba? So ibig sabihin, when we talk about exclusive, only few numbers of species can be located on the color purple or species. And when we talk about inclusive, if we're going to look at the kingdom, technically we can view a wide array of organisms that can be located in the kingdom. So that works like that. If we're going to look at this one, we have here the example of black bear, no? Ursus americanus. So if we traverse from species to domain, so the species or specific epithet of American black bear is Ursus. The genus is Ursidae. The family is Ursidae. The order is Carnivora. The class is Mammalia. Phylum Chordata. Kingdom Animalia, and domain Eukarya. So it works that way, no? Just like what I've mentioned, the arrangement of species to domain is from exclusive to inclusive. And if we're going to traverse backwards from domain to species, we can easily distinguish that the arrangement from domain to species is from inclusive to exclusive, no? The specific part narrows down, no? Now, so these are some of the history when we talk about taxonomy. So technically, there are lots of scientists that have talked about or study the taxonomy, no, or the naming of specific organism and different species, no. In our list, we have the Carolus Linnaeus. No, in 1735, he has mentioned that there are 2 kingdoms, no. We have the plant and animals, no, because those are the basic things that can be seen by our naked eye, no. Carolus Linnaeus back then do not know yet that there are far more than things that eyes can see, which are the prokaryotic organism, and we need the aid of the microscope for us to be able to observe it. In 1866, Haeckel has coined that there are 3 kingdoms, no. We have the plant, the animals, and in addition, the protists. The protists is a unicellular organism that live and thrive in the aqueous environment. Some of the example of the protists are the amoeba, no? If you are familiar with the amoebiasis, this is a single-celled organism that can wreak havoc into your stomach when you ingest or digest it. Diba? Ano pa example? We have the euglena and paramecium or paramecia. No? Those are the example of the protists. Next one, in 1925, we have Shatton. Shatton naman has mentioned that there are 2 empires, no? Namely the prokaryote and the eukaryote. In your Gen Bio 1, we distinguish the difference of the prokaryote and the eukaryote. So to simply put it in terms, prokaryotic organism or prokaryote do not have a nucleus, and eukaryotic organism do contain a nucleus. Next, in 1938, Copeland has mentioned that there are 4 kingdoms that can be seen in our Earth, no, here on Earth, no, namely the Monera, protist, plant, and animal. So the term Monera in today's time was just a fusion, no, or pinagsama lang na bacteria at saka archaea. But since then, in 1938, they have no distinction between archaea and bacteria. They use the term Monera in exchange for these two domains that we have today. No, we have the domain bacteria and archaea. So as you can see, from Linnaeus in 1735 to Woos in 1990, we have the development, no, or the history of taxonomy, no, and later on we will know what is the correct, no, with the help of Woos. Okay, we have in 1969 naman we have the Whittaker. He has proposed that there are 5 kingdoms, namely the Monera, no, which is composed of bacteria and archaea, protist or protista, plantae or plant, and also animalia. And in addition, on Whittaker in 1969, he also added the fungi. No, and in 1990 we have Woos that believe that there are 3 domains of life, namely the bacteria or eubacteria or true bacteria, archaea, and eukaryote. No? So this is the whole history of taxonomy. No? But mind you, class, the most important thing that I want you to learn is the taxonomic rank, no, on how they are arranged from domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, so that you can easily distinguish the scientific name of the specific organism. So as you can see in here, this is the old 5 kingdom system. No, we're not going to discuss all of this one because we are running out of time. But as you can see, there are just a fusion, no? Just like what I've mentioned earlier when we talk about Monera, we are talking about the bacteria and the archaea domain, no? Protista, fungi, plantain, animalia belongs to domain eukarya or eukaryotic. Hence, we can see the cell types in Monera that there are prokaryotic, and in Protista, fungi, plantain, animalia are eukaryotic, no? Let us focus on the sige, isa-isa na nga natin. Cellular organization. Prokaryotic organism or Monera in the name of bacteria and archaea are unicellular in nature, meaning they are composed of single cell only. In Protista, it is known to be, or they are known to be unicellular. But there are different cases when you talk about fungi. Sir Mark, why did you include that fungi is considered to be as multicellular and unicellular? So there, technically, fungi have different organization. No? They can be unicellular and multicellular. One example of unicellular fungi is the Saccharomyces cerevisiae, or the yeast that we know of. No, it is used for baking or creating bread and alcohol in the form or in the process called fermentation. But again, Saccharomyces cerevisiae or fungi, it can be unicellular. No, in our example, we have the yeast. Sir Mark, how about the multicellular fungi? No, we have mushrooms. No, they are multicellular in nature, meaning they are composed of many cells, and they behave like, sometimes they behave like plants. No, because they also use different what I call this, different nutrition from their neighboring in the neighbor of their habitat. Also, in the plantae or plants, we have multicellular, meaning they are composed of many cells. And lastly, we have the animals or animalia, which is composed of many cells. Now, let us proceed on the next part of the slide. No, let us give importance to what Carl Woos has mentioned. No, because Carl Woos really contributed to how we view domain and kingdom separately. No, on the latter part of the history of taxonomy, we have discovered that Monera is composed of bacteria and archaea. But since they are both different, which we will discuss later on, they are different in different, or in some ways, we can easily distinguish the difference of domain from the kingdom. No? If we're going to look at this one, Carl Woos' discovery during the 1960s paved the way of category broader than kingdom. Now we call it domain, no? So dati, wala pang domain. The only thing that we have is kingdom, no? But since Carl Woos is very great scientist, no? He discovered, or he has included the domain. Today, we now adopt the three-domain system of classification. These are the BAE that we also use, no? Or the acronym that we use is BAE for us to classify, no, the different three domains of system. The BAE stands for bacteria, archaea, and rough. So as you can see, example, no, the bacteria, we have the example of green non-sulfur bacteria, gram-positive, purple bacteria, cyanobacteria, and many more. In archaea naman, we have the pyrodictum, halophiles, and many more. In Eukarya, these are the most common one. We have the plants, animals, fungi, flagellates, and diplomonads. No? So these are the great Carlos. No? So as you can see in this one, just like what I have mentioned on the previous time, no, when we talk about the taxonomic rank, it traverses from broader to narrower, from inclusive to exclusive, from domain to species. No, since it is arranged in inverted pyramid, you can easily distinguish that the lower part is more inclusive compared to the upper part. No, we're not going to discuss all of this one or all of this example. No, but for example, we have here the domain, domain Eukarya, kingdom Plantae, phylum Angiospermae or flowering plants or Angiosperm, class Dicotyledonea or Dicotyledons or Dicots, order Rosales or Rose, family Rosaceae, genus Rosa, and species Rosa gallica or Galicia. So we also have here the example of different organisms. No, Sir Mark, I have encountered in one of the book that there are a scientific name that follows trinomial, or meaning three terms. For example, you have the Canis lupus familiaris. So this is also often used, no, yung trinomial, because there is a specific subspecies. Now, in our example, the Canis is the genus, the lupus and familiaris signifies the specific epithet or the species and the subspecies. Okay? So if you're going to look at the example again, the species is the dog or the Canis lupus familiaris. The species is the Canis. Sorry, the species is the lupus. The genus is the Canis. The family is Canidae. Order Carnivora, class Mammalia, phylum Chordata or Chordates, kingdom Animalia, and domain Eukarya. So for you to be able to understand or retain this into your hearts and mind, no, there are also mnemonics that we can use, no, for us to know the proper taxonomic rank. No? So from domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, we can use this one. No, dear King Philip, come over for great spaghetti. Again, dear King Philip, come over for great spaghetti. So the first letter signifies the first letter acts as an acronym, or it signifies the first letter of the taxonomic rank. Meron naman din tayo dito from kingdom naman, no? The mnemonics goes like this. Katy Perry comes over for grape soda. Again, Katy Perry comes over for grape soda. So this simply means from kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So again, I think that wraps up our introduction about taxonomy and phylogenetics. So since our time is very limited, I ask for your patience in understanding and also reading in advance when you talk about taxonomy and phylogenetics. Because mind you, for those students that will proceed in collegiate level that have something to do with health-related or allied science, our discussion about taxonomy and phylogenetics is very anemic, meaning it's only an introduction or an overview. So mind you, to help yourself also, no, you may also use some references or internet guides in exploring the different taxonomy and phylogenetics. So now let us proceed on the next part of our lesson, which is all about the prokaryotes, namely the archaea and the bacteria. So these are our objectives for the second part of the video. No, first one, compare and contrast the archaea and bacteria. Second, describe the distinctive characteristic of archaea. Third, describe the distinct characteristic of bacteria. Fourth, classify a given species into specific taxon or of archaea and bacteria. So now let us talk about the prokaryotic cell first. In your Gen Bio 1, I believe this has already been discussed by your bio teachers. No, there are distinct difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cell, number one, do not contain, say, nucleus. No, instead it has a nucleoid region wherein the DNA can be located. Another thing about prokaryotic cell is number two, DNA is unbound region called nucleoid. Yan ang sinasabi ko kanina. No? It does not have a nucleus, no? An extra covering that envelopes or encapsulates the DNA. Instead, it has a nucleoid region wherein the DNA or the blueprint of life is located. Third, it does not have a membrane-bound organelle. So unlike eukaryotic organism that contains Golgi apparatus, mitochondria and such, no, prokaryotic cell do not contain membrane-bound organelle. And lastly, cytoplasm bound by the plasma membrane. So prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell both contain a cytoplasm. So technically, these are the example of bacteria. So prokaryotes rather. Prokaryotic organism or prokaryotic cell thrive almost everywhere, including places like too acidic, too salty, too cold or hot, no? Because they are known to be as a primitive organism. So technically, the Monera or the bacteria and archaea are the organism that live and thrive on the primitive earth. So technically, nauna sila kumpara sa ating mga tao. Ano? Due to their ability to adapt to the diverse habitat, prokaryotes are the most abundant organism on Earth. So technically, prokaryotic organism is everywhere. No? Kahit nga sa ating mga tao or humans, prokaryotic organism may be also located in our system if they are infected for some cases. No? So technically, may mga bacteria din sa ating katawan. No? For example, E. coli can be located at our small and large intestine. No? There are prokaryotic organisms, so they tend to be everywhere. No? They are omnipresent. Prokaryotic cell have a varieties of shape. So as you can see, there are only three types or category, no, of when we talk about the shapes of the prokaryotic cell. So for the first one, we have the spherical. We have the cocci or cocci. Cocci or coccus. No, C-O-C-C-I. Okay, sorry, C-O-C-C-I. So we have the spherical bacteria. Next one, we have the rod shape known as bacillus. B-A-C-I-L-L-U-S. So yung lactobacillus that you know of is an example of rod shape or bacillus prokaryotic cell na ang shape ay rod cell. For the next one, we have the spiral, no, or we call it spirilla or spirochete, no. Their shape technically is spiral in nature. So we talk about the structure of prokaryotic organism. I think this has already been discussed to you. It composed of a fimbriae, no, a projection outside of the cell membrane, the nucleoid region wherein the DNA is located, the ribosome that helps the creation of protein or protein synthesis, the plasma membrane, the cell wall, the capsule, and also the flagellum. No, you can see at the left side of the screen, the darkened part is a thin section of the bacillus coagulans, or it is in the electron microscope. No? So here are some of the parts, no, that has been discussed to you. For the first one, we have the sex pilus. No? It is used to elongate when it undergo cell conjugation, no? Wherein the DNA is passed down from one prokaryote to the another prokaryote, no? Nagkakaroon ng elongation or nagkakaroon ng conjugation na tinatawag or connection from one cell to the another. Next one, we have the fimbriae or the hair-like structure that is used for adhesion or para dumikit sa different surface. Therefore, it can be an omnipresent organism or it can be attached to anywhere here on Earth. The flagellum or flagella is used for locomotion or movement, no? And then the rest, as we have mentioned, no, we have the mesosome, the plasma membrane that folds into cytoplasm and increase surface area. Inclusion body that stores nutrients for later use. No, ito yung kanilang, kung sa plant cell, it has a storage like vacuole, no, stores water and other food. In prokaryotic cell, it has an inclusion body. It also has ribosome, which is used for protein synthesis, nucleoid for bacterial chromosome, plasma membrane for protection, cell wall also is for additional protection, and glycocalyx is for protection and also for attachment, no, for the different surface wherein prokaryotic cell is present. So now let us talk about the difference of archaea and bacteria. So there are different distinction between these two. No, the key distinction of bacteria from archaea is that the former live in optimal environment while the latter lives in extreme environment, as those with extreme salinity, temperature, or pH. So we have here the example. We have the anthrax. No, si anthrax ay example natin. So they can live in an environment, for example, in soil. No, ito yung common story about anthrax. No, anthrax ay a prokaryotic organism, a bacteria that can be linked from one organism to the another organism. So medyo madumi talaga ang ating dito, ang ating lapag, no, or ating sahig, particularly ang ating mga lupa, because it can contain a bacteria called an anthrax, and back then that is one of the common things that the scientists fight over, no. Ito yung talagang rare but infectious disease, no. It contains a spore. No, when you inhale the spore, it can wreak havoc to an organism. For example, punta tayo sa mga farm, no. No, sa mga farm, may mga organism that used to smell or inaamoy yung ating mga grass, and sometimes, no, Bacillus anthracis or anthrax can be linked, no, to organism. So meron tayo, for example, the bacterium known as Bacillus anthracis or anthrax can be dormant or not active for quite some time. So they're very deadly, ano. But once they can find a place where can they live and thrive, they start to live, no, or actively grow the cell, and they can wreak havoc to the organisms. For example, meron tayong cow na sumisinghot doon sa grass, ano, and for example, doon sa lapag or sa soil, there's a spore of the Bacillus anthracis. So technically, the cow can inhale the spore, and the spore of the Bacillus anthracis can be or can infect the cow. Hence, it can cause death of the cow. No? Next one, let us talk about the difference of archaea at saka bacteria when it comes to their structure. No? Technically, the difference between the two is their chemical bonding, ano, or the formula of their plasma membrane. No, in chemistry, I don't know if your chemistry teacher has taught you about the nomenclature or naming of the compounds, but the distinct difference of archaea and bacteria is the linkages or the bond. If you're going to look at the structure, the color yellow one, the different linkages of the phosphate group to the phenanyl side chain is what? The linkages. In archaea, it contains an ether linkage. Again, in archaea, it contains an ether linkage. No, but in eukarya or bacteria, it contains an ester linkage. So, Mark, what is the difference between ester and ether? And what are their implications when it comes to the life of the archaea and eukarya? So very simple, no? When we talk about ether linkage, it is a C double bond. C with a single bond with carbon, oxygen, and also R group, no, other side chain. And technically, ether linkage is more stable compared kay ester linkage, no? Kasi as you can see in the ester linkage, it is C double bond O and is connected with the R group or the side chain and other oxygen. So technically, bacteria and eukarya plasma membrane, which is composed of ester linkage, can be reactive to different elements or compound that they are subjected into. While ether linkage, as you can see, has a connection in the R side, no, R group, and single bond with a oxygen. So they are more stable. So Sir Mark, ano implication nito? Technically, if you are more stable, you cannot react to any compound or element. So technically, RK can live and thrive to an environment that is harsh in nature. So for example, ng RK natin, the extremophile, which can live and thrive in a extreme environment, no? We will give an example of the RK in the next slides to come. But for context again, the difference of RK and bacteria has something to do with the plasma membrane. The RK contained an ether linkage, which is stable and or more stable than ester linkage. And the bacteria contains an ester linkage, C double bond O, R group, at saka connected sa oxygen. So, okay, we have the RK versus bacteria. So if we're going to look or examine the different part of the RK, no, the bacterial cell wall are made up of peptidoglycan. Pinagsama lang itong protein, fats, at saka sugar. No? Peptidoglycan is just a mixture of sugar, fats, and protein. Archaean cell wall lack peptidoglycan but are made of compounds that differ across the different groups. So as you can see in the picture, they really vary in different things, no? Anong meron kay RK cell wall, no? For example, we have the Methanobacterium, Methanosphaera, at saka Methanobrevibacter. Ano meron tayo, no? Composed siya sa napakadami or complex na compound, no? It has a pseudomurine, phospholipid L-glycerol ether, cytoplasmic membrane, and heteropolysaccharide. No, it's much more complex compared to bacterial cell wall. No, in short, yun lang ang gusto nating sabihin. And again, the difference of RK and bacteria is that RK is made up of ether bond, while bacterial is made up of ester bond, no, which is less stable compared to ether bond. We're not going to discuss all of this, but for summary, no, again, bacteria is made up of ester and RK is made of ether bond. Eukarya is also ester. So technically, bacteria and RK can easily react to the environment. Hence, they are more unstable. Archaebacteria is made up of carbon linkage, ether, which makes them more stable and they cannot react easily to their environment. And then the list of the difference and similarities continues. So if we're going to look at this one, bacteria, RK, and eukarya are the three domains of life. Okay. So let us talk about the bacterial cell wall and how did we come up with the different parts of the cell wall. So technically, bacteria can be classified depending on their cell wall composition, which can be carried out using Gram stain technique. I believe this has been discussed to you in your Gen Bio 1. No? This method was developed in 1882 by Hans Christian Gram. No? Hence, we coined the term Gram staining. He is a Danish physician. If we're going to look at this one, the gram-positive and the gram-negative bacteria is very different. No? In what ways? Technically, gram-negative bacteria has a lipopolysaccharide. No? So technically, they had an additional protection on their outer membrane. Hence, they are more, they have more virulence. Or ibig sabihin, mas delikado sila compared to gram-positive bacteria. No? Or mas madaling mamatay si gram-positive compared to gram-negative bacteria. Also, gram-negative bacteria contains a porine. No? As you can see in the part wherein the lipopolysaccharide is connected. Both gram-positive and negative contains peptidoglycan and periplasmic space and also cytoplasmic membrane, pati protein. So this is the method that or procedure that we use in gram staining. First and foremost, when you have your sample that is smeared already in your glass slide, no, you have to apply first the crystal violet or the purple dye. So the tendency is if you are gram-positive bacteria, it can easily penetrate or associated to the cell wall of or the cell membrane of the gram-positive bacteria. The next one is the application of iodine or the mordant. Thirdly is the alcohol wash or the decolorization. And last is the application of safranin or the counterstain. So if you are gram-negative bacteria, there's a tendency that all of the mordant has been washed, no, in the second and third process. And the thing that will be attached to you or the color of your staining when you are gram-negative is pinkish to red color pigmentation. No? As you can see in the example, anong meron tayo sa example? In the example, the gram-positive bacteria is purple. No? Just like what I have mentioned earlier, the mordant or the crystal violet has been added to the outer membrane of the bacteria. No? The gram-positive. Peptidoglycan traps crystal violet, which makes them red safranin dye. And in gram-negative, crystal violet is easily rinsed away, revealing the red safranin. Hence, it is colored pink to red pigmentation. Now, let us talk about the nutrition or nutrients, or how does prokaryotic cell get their nutrition. Prokaryotic cell or prokaryotes can further be classified according to how they obtain their energy and organic compound. So technically, we have autotrophs and heterotrophs, which I know you are familiar already with. No? Autotrophs are those organisms who can fulfill their carbon needs by obtaining carbon dioxide or related inorganic compound. So what are the other inorganic compound that they can get from their environment? No, we have ammonia. So, Sir Mark, saan ginagamit yung nitrogen? Nitrogen is used as a backbone of life in DNA, no? Or in nucleic acid. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, are those who feed an organic compound to obtain carbon. Energy source can be light or other compounds. So, the primary example of autotrophs are the plants, no? They use photosynthesis to produce their own food. And heterotrophs, for example, as humans, get our organic compound by eating the plants or other sources of organic compound. So these are the different types of autotrophs. We have the photoautotroph and chemoautotroph. When we talk about photo, we are referring to light. So photoautotrophs are the types of organisms that are photosynthetic in nature, meaning they can do photosynthesis or photosynthesize. We have the example in here, the algae or algae and protists, plus the plant. So the carbon source is the carbon dioxide and other compound. On the other type of the autotroph, we have the chemoautotroph, in which it is a unique prokaryotic cell or prokaryotic organism that gets their carbon and other related compound by means of gathering other chemicals or inorganic compounds such as hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, and iron sources. For the heterotroph, we have the photoheterotroph and the chemoheterotroph. The photoheterotroph uses light, no, in getting their organic compound sources. No? For example, we have the salt-loving prokaryotes, the Rhodobacter chloroflexus, and the chloroflexus. For the chemoheterotroph, we have the prokaryotes in the form called Clostridium, no? Protists, fungi, animals, and also some plants. They get their organic compound by harnessing the different chemicals that they can get from their environment. So as you can see, there are also group of bacteria, namely the alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and epsilon subgroup. So for the alpha group, we have the rhizobium, or the arrow 1 signifies where the rhizobium is located. Okay, the circular one. The beta subgroup is the Nitrosomonas or Nitrosomonas. The gamma subgroup is the Thiomargarita namibinensis. The delta subgroup is Chondromyces crocatus. And for the epsilon subgroup, we have the Helicobacter pylori. No? Can be located saan? Sa ating stomach. No? Can be located in our stomach. For the groups of bacteria, we have the chlamydias. No? As you can see in the arrow, the chlamydia is being showcased. The spirochetes, as you can see, I have mentioned earlier that they are spiral in nature. Example natin is the Leptospira. For the cyanobacteria, we have the Oscillatoria, the green one. For the gram-positive bacteria, we have the Streptomyces, and we also have the Mycoplasma. So we have here the cyanobacteria, a major group of prokaryotes with plant-like oxygen-generating photosynthesis. Is considered one of the most important factors for the diversification of life. So technically, why do we always use or coin the term uh, cyanobacteria as a factor for the diversification of life? Technically, because of their ability to produce oxygen. No, alongside with plants, they produce oxygen which we humans consume for us to live and die. Plant chloroplasts likely evolved from cyanobacteria by the process called endosymbiosis. So technically, endosymbiosis is the process wherein different cell engulf another part of the cell, and they can live and produce another species. No? Cyanobacteria are abundant components of freshwater and marine phytoplankton. When cyanobacteria filled the early waters, no, they filled in seas and atmosphere with oxygen, enabling evolution of more life forms that eventually led to Cambrian explosion. So these are the things that I want you to learn about cyanobacteria. No, they have produced, or the byproduct that they have produced are oxygen, which is very essential, or one of the things that we need for us to survive and produce life. Tama ba? And in Cambrian explosion that happens millions, if not billions, millions of years ago, the Cambrian explosion just simply means that it starts the booming or resurgence of life. No? Nagkaroon ulit ng maraming life form because of the presence or abundance of oxygen. Next one, we are done with the bacteria. Let us talk about the archaeans, no, or the archaea. We have here the example of methanogens who release methane as a metabolic byproduct. An example species is the methanobacterium, which lives in hot, low oxygen environments such as human gut, hot spring, and wastewater. No? We have the methanogens that produces methane as the byproduct. We also have the halophiles or halophiles that used to live in a high salt water or high salinity content environment. We have the psychrophiles, an archaea who live and thrive at a temperature below 15 degrees Celsius. They are commonly found in waters and soil of the Arctic and Antarctic regions. So technically, those that have a lower temperature. An example of this is the Pseudomonas. No? The thermophiles naman, the one that lives in temperature that is higher than 60 degrees Celsius. They thrive in hot spring and hydrothermal vent. So I think this marks the end of the lecture, no? But one thing is for sure, no? All of these things that we have talked about, the bacteria and cyanobacteria, I just want to inculcate one thing or lesson to each and every one of you. First and foremost, congratulations if you have reached the end of this video. I believe you are sleepy, but thank you for bearing with me, and hopefully you pass the examination. One thing that I want you to learn about science is that it teaches us life lessons. Tama ba? So all of the things that I have mentioned, I believe, yung iba dyan makakalimutan mo. But one thing that I want to teach you is that there is this one thing that we can learn from bacteria and archaea. And what is that? No? From the beginning of times, the prokaryotes or the archaea and bacteria lives a simple life, meaning they are not complex in nature. So if you're going to contextualize this in life, I want you to realize that you need to live within your means. So technically, you have to be simple for you to prolong your life. No? So again, live a life that is worth living for, just like archaea and bacteria, because they are simple, they were able to prolong their life. And that's the very essence of evolution, di ba? You have to be prolonged, or you have a life that has long, and you have to reproduce and procreate. So that would be all, and thank you for listening. I hope you pass your examination. So if you are still in this video, if you see Sir Mark in the school, say the term Archaeans. Okay, if you encounter me in the school, say Archaeans so that I know that you reached the end of the videos. That would be all for today. Thank you and